Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around we're doing Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan from 1982. And of course to do that in any reasonable way, I also have to look at 1966's The Space Seed, the prequel to Wrath of Khan, where we first meet the villain of the piece, Khan Noonien Singh, played by Ricardo Montalban. And that was a journey. Looking at those two together, we find out some weird things about Khan's backstory, and we find out how very vague the Federation's knowledge of Australian history is. So let's get started. Space Seed, the original story in which Ricardo Montalban's character Khan Noonien Singh appears in the Star Trek universe, is from the first season of Star Trek in 1966. And we're going to make some allowances for the fact that it's episodic TV on a limited budget in 1966, and they've got to tell quite a complex story in a 50-minute format, along with all the gatekeeping and censorship that's involved in 1960s American television. The Enterprise, while out cruising the universe, finds a DY-100 class spaceship drifting between the stars. Doesn't tell you where. It's not important to the story. This spaceship, which is meant for interplanetary travel, is around 200 years old. A bit of a confusion there. They find out that the spaceship is responding to the presence of another spaceship nearby and is warming things up and getting the oxygen and nitrogen going so that it's got a livable atmosphere on the ship. Kirk, Spock, McCoy, and a historian, Marla Ivers, played by Madeline Rue.
Oh, I'll need somebody familiar with the late 20th century Earth. Here's a chance for that historian to do something for a change. What's her name? McGivers?
Beam over to the spaceship and find a crew of about 70 human beings in suspended animation. In response to them being on the spaceship, one of the capsules starts reviving the person inside that capsule, who turns out to be a man called Khan, played by Ricardo Montalban. The capsule starts malfunctioning and Kirk breaks into the capsule to rescue Khan. It's something we kind of forget in the later parts of the narrative, particularly when we get to Star Trek II, that Kirk actually saves Khan's life at the start of their relationship, let's say. Khan is beamed over to the Enterprise and looked after by McCoy, whom he threatens with a scalpel. I like DeForest Kelley's McCoy in Star Trek. And in this one, he's got a scalpel to his neck from an unknown man who proves himself to be very strong and very fast. And he's very cool about it.
Well, either choke me or cut my throat. Make up your mind.
He takes it totally calmly. And I like that. I like that courage and that confidence in his own ability to judge character, that he knows that Khan isn't going to kill him. They find out the guy's called Khan, and he dates back to the eugenics wars in the 1990s, a part of the Star Trek timeline that the series has tried to retcon ever since this episode was made. The 1990s crept up on us pretty fast. We found out that the world wasn't taken over by a whole bunch of genetic supermen who conquered most of the planet and put in an authoritarian, quite Nazi rule over most of the planet. And the genetic supermen in the 1990s were defeated in something called the War Against Tyranny. The historian Marla McGivers falls instantly in love with Khan, which is probably against her work contract with the Federation. And we'll talk about MacGyver more in a moment. So Khan eventually takes over the Enterprise with Marla McGiver's assistance, revives all of his crew, and almost kills Kirk while trying to take over the Enterprise so that he can find a colony planet and settle that planet and conquer whoever's living there in order to build his empire back. So Khan as a character is really interesting in Space Seed, even more so than he is in Wrath of Khan. Khan in this is arrogant and privileged and so confident in his superiority, genetically, physically, mentally, that he makes a lot of mistakes. He's overconfident. He's got a touch of Dunning-Kruger, even though he is, in some ways, a superior being. And the implication there, which is pretty strong, and I think a nice piece of writing, is that somebody who has ruled a quarter of the human race got defeated and suddenly had to flee in a spaceship. And that defeat has cut some wires in Khan's brain. He can't handle being defeated in any way. He can't handle adversity as well as, say, a lesser human being often does, because he hasn't had to have himself challenged to that degree previously in his life. It's an interesting character trait there. And the one thing that Khan lacks and doesn't seem to be able to embrace is resilience. And that inflexibility is something that we see in the modern times in various contexts with various political leaders. The other part, which is kind of squirmy and make me slightly squeamish in watching Space Seed, is the relationship that Khan has with Marla McGivers, who is instantly attracted to this man from the past. She's a historian who is drawn to the myth of strong men. Her quarters in the Enterprise are full of statues of muscular men and sketches that she's done of gladiators and other things. She's got a real thing for the rough boys. And when she meets Khan, the relationship quickly develops. Khan tells her she should wear her hair down, which is a red flag. Telling somebody how to dress is such a red flag in the modern era. And the dynamic and the relationship between Khan and McGivers, where he grabs her hand and twists her wrist and causes her physical pain to get her to submit to him, is very much a top-bottom BDSM relationship in the context of the 1960s American TV show. It is overtly sexual, and it is overtly a dominant submissive relationship. And that kind of conflicts with some of the things Khan says in Wrath of Khan about his beloved wife. There's a scene also in the episode where he's reviving his crew members, and there's a moment after revival between him and one of the female super people, which suggests that he wasn't entirely lonely in his previous life. That has some complicating implications in his relationship with the crew member he seduces. In Space Seed, Kirk eventually defeats Khan in a fight, mostly by grabbing a pry bar out of the console of the engineering bay and whacking him with a weapon, something he probably learned fighting Gorns. Khan and his crew are put in the brig and then dumped onto SETI Alpha 5. And at the end of the episode, there's an allusion to Milton. It is better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven. And Kirk and Spock have a bit of a discussion how we'll be interested to come back to SETI Alpha 5 in about 200 years to see what kind of civilization develops there. Here's where I have a problem with this. Looking at the implications of this, and of course this is a 1960s TV series, I fully acknowledge that thinking it through and thinking about the implications of an episodic TV show is a bit wanky. The Federation has left 70 people on a planet where life's going to be rough and it's going to be tough for them to survive and to thrive, even though they are genetic super people and they've got strengths and other qualities that will lean things in their favor. You'd think that at least once or twice, every few years, you get a starship to just cruise past the planet, do a bit of a scan. The idea of simply leaving them there is one with some horrible moral implications to it. There's a duty of care there, which is the Federation just doesn't do. And the other thing which is scary in its implications, and it's just a throwaway line towards the end, when Kirk's making his decision about what to do with Khan and his people, and does a formal court-martial thing to give McGivers the possibility of either being court-martialed or going with Khan. There's a discussion around that of putting these genetic super beings into reorientation centers in the Federation. That's got some scary implications to it, the idea of reorientation centers as a means of dealing with criminality. It'd be interesting to find out what they meant by that. And again, it's quite disturbing in its implications. But also, this is a 1960s TV show. But you've got to go with the text and the script and the video that we've got. And the video says reorientation centers. In a post-World War II world, that's got some horrible implications to it. So Khan and his crew are dumped on SETI Alpha 5, and we zip forward 15 years or so to Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. After Star Trek, the motion picture, there were some bits that needed to be fixed if they were going to continue to make Star Trek movies. For a start, those lingering establishing shots of the Enterprise and the Enterprise going in to meet V'Ger and all that kind of stuff were out. They needed to have something a bit more dynamic. They needed something that was a little bit quicker paced. and also involved more of the characters that people knew and loved from the series. And of course, the animated series after that. So they start out with Admiral Kirk training younger officers at Starfleet Academy. That's where we hit the Kobayashi Maru training simulator, where there's no good answer. It's a test of character and how you handle defeat and how you handle things you can't control. Spock, McCoy, Uhura, and Sulu are in the training simulator helping to train the cadets. Saavik, played by Kirstie Alley, is there as well, being the captain of the simulation, and doesn't understand the purpose of the simulation, which she fails to rescue the Kobayashi Maru from the Klingon neutral zone, and she's told that Kirk is the only person who ever defeated the Kobayashi Maru simulator, basically by cheating and reprogramming the simulation. Kirk's going through a midlife crisis. He's clinically depressed. He's just turning 50 and he can't handle it. He's training and he's got an admiralty and he's become a teacher rather than an explorer. And McCoy tells him, you should never have taken the promotion. You should have stayed on the starship. It's his 50th birthday. Spock gives him a book, A Tale of Two Cities, an old edition of Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities, which then rolls into the themes at the end of the film. It is a far, far better thing I do than I've ever done before, that kind of stuff. And McCoy's present merges with that perfectly, because McCoy gives him some reading glasses, because Kirk can't handle the eye drops that fix people's vision in the 23rd century. He's allergic to them, and so he needs reading glasses. So he gets reading glasses from McCoy and a book from Spock. So their presents merge together to form a better present for Kirk's 50th birthday. It's never said 50, but it was in the discussions with Shatner. Shatner was a bit pissed off. He didn't want to play an older Kirk. He said, oh, well, with makeup, I can play a younger Kirk. But the producers just went, nah, you're playing an older Kirk. And that rolls into it too, that midlife crisis that Kirk has, and the later discoveries about his son David, played by Merritt Patrick, strengthen the narrative for Kirk as a character who can seem, because of Shatner's acting, to be pompous and self-important, is given a vulnerability almost against Shatner's will, which strengthens our ties with the character. Meanwhile, the USS Reliant, among whose crew members is Chekhov, and whose captain, Terrell, is played by Paul Winfield, are looking for a planet for the Genesis project. They need to find a totally lifeless planet to test this new invention, which will put life onto a lifeless planet by rearranging everything, probably in some form of iteration of transporter technology, putting a whole ecosystem and making a lifeless planet have life. But they need a planet that is totally without life, because they're a little bit Greenpeace about that kind of thing. So Captain Terrell and Chekhov land, check out something which might be a piece of life on the planet, and find themselves captured by the crew of the Botany Bay and Khan Noonien Singh. Here's the thing, in Space Seed, and I should have mentioned this when I was talking about Space Seed, they got the historical facts of Australia wrong. They talk about the colony at Botany Bay, a penal colony was settled at Botany Bay. It wasn't. Botany Bay was where Captain Cook first landed, and Captain Arthur fell after that in the First Fleet, but there wasn't enough water in Botany Bay for a colony. So they went up around the coast a little bit and into Sydney Harbour and ended up forming the colony at Sydney Cove, about 15 kilometres away. So they're wrong about Botany Bay being a penal colony. Botany Bay was like the outer suburbs of penal colony. But what do Americans care about Australian history? So Terrell and Chekhov are confused because they think it's SETI Alpha 6. But Khan disabuses them of this notion in this wonderful piece of histrionic acting by Ricardo Montalban.
In SETI Alpha 5 there was life, a fair chance. This is SETI Alpha 5!
SETI Alpha 6 has exploded for some random reason, and it's knocked SETI Alpha 5 out of its orbit, turned it into a desert planet with incredibly high winds.
I never forget a face. Mr. Jekyll.
And only one life form left, this SETI eel, which Khan and his people realize can be used as a mind control weapon. They put a SETI Alpha eel baby into the ears of both Terrell and Chekhov in order to mentally control them, and to tell the Regular One research station run by Carol Marcus and her son David that Ceti Alpha 6 is the place to set off the Genesis device. And they are taking Reliant to the Regular One base in order to grab all the equipment for the Genesis program and take it under control of Starfleet when it's actually a civilian research project that Starfleet is liaising with. The Marcuses are pissed off by this because they're not militarists. And so Carol Marcus contacts her ex-boyfriend, James T. Kirk, and says, "Why are you taking Genesis away from us?" And Kirk doesn't know anything about Genesis. He's too busy feeling sorry for himself in his nice apartment. So him, Spock, and McCoy find out what Genesis is by looking at a video that Carol Marcus set up about the project she was proposing to the Federation. McCoy instantly understands the implications of Genesis as a weapon, and Spock is more even-handed about it, saying there's a possibility of giving more Lebensraum to the Federation by using the Genesis device to make lifeless planets life-filled. Kirk tries to reassure Carol that they're not stealing Genesis from her, but Khan in the Reliant is jamming the signal. Of course, the Enterprise, and they do some nice establishing shots of the Enterprise. The Enterprise is shot beautifully in this film compared to the way it's shot in the first movie. Kirk flies towards Regular and has an encounter with the Reliant, and he basically flubs it. He doesn't, Reliant doesn't answer his hails. He doesn't put the shields up soon enough, and Reliant injures the Enterprise, including killing Scotty's nephew, a kid called Peter Preston, who is one of the trainees who's on the cruise. Which brings me to the 4K I watched of Wrath of Khan. There's two versions of the movie here. There's the theatrical version and the director's cut. Nicholas Meyer's director's cut of this film is much better than the theatrical version because it does have those character beats where you find out that cadet that Scotty brings up onto the bridge, dead in his arms, is his nephew, and his nephew acted heroically during the attack on the Enterprise by the Reliant. There's more character beats in it. It doesn't extend the runtime too much, but it gives just those little bits of character beats that enhance the narrative in a useful way. It's not self-indulgent in any way, but the director's cut for me is the much superior version. And then we have the cat and mouse between Kirk and Khan, who we never see in the same space. We see them on the screens yelling at each other and, talking to each other, but we never actually see hero and antagonist in the same space, which is kind of interesting and works well. No stage is big enough for two histrionic actors like William Shatner and Ricardo Montalban to share the same physical space in the modern era. Of course, they do that in the TV series, but they're both over-the-top theatrical kinds of actors, and they play off each other wonderfully. We get Khan quoting Moby Dick, which is one of the books that was in the Botany Bay. When Terrell and Chekhov land and find the wreckage of the Botany Bay, they do see a copy of Moby Dick. Of course, Kirk tricks Khan to lower his shields and damages the Reliant as well, and then heads at best speed to the Regular One research station and finds that Khan has been there before them and has killed most of the research crew, except for Carol Marcus and her son and one other guy who ends up getting shot anyway. They find Captain Terrell and Chekhov in a storage container and rescue them, and then find out that Carol and David have gone to a place inside the asteroid next to the base where they were doing more research and doing more testing. That's when Terrell and Chekhov turn out to still be under the control of Khan, and Khan teleports the Genesis device away and leaves Kirk trapped inside a planetoid. That's when we get William Shatner overacting with the Khan bit, which is the iconic moment in the movie for a lot of people. And that I found interesting this time around because I realized something about it I hadn't realized previously watching this movie. When Kirk screams at Khan because Khan has left him trapped inside the asteroid next to the Regular base, he's acting because he knows in 2 hours Spock is going to affix the Enterprise enough for them to continue going against Khan. So screaming like he's been trapped by Khan in this asteroid is bullshit. He is acting so that Khan will believe him. And a lot of people don't really pick up on that. when they watch this. I was talking with Sal about it, and she didn't pick up on it either. Kirk is bullshitting in that moment. Of course, we know that Khan is totally insane. Not only has he been defeated on Earth during the eugenics wars and the war against tyranny, but he's been left on Ceti Alpha 5 a year into their colonization of the planet. Ceti Alpha 6 blows up, and everything goes to shit.
Admiral Kirk never bothered to check on our progress.
His wife is killed by a Ceti eel soon after colonization. And then we get the cat and mouse game as Kirk and Khan fight against each other in the Mutara Nebula. And Kirk, being a three-dimensional thinker who is trained in this kind of warfare, does much better than Khan, who, possibly because of his obsessive nuttiness and his monstrous ego, can't get his head around fighting a three-dimensional war in a nebula. Ultimately gets defeated, sets off the Genesis device, the Enterprise, which is still only working on impulse power, can't get away fast enough to beat the effects of the Genesis device unless somebody does something. And that person, of course, is Spock. And Spock goes in to fix the main reactor in the Enterprise in a sea of radiation and ultimately dies of radiation poisoning, having rescued the Enterprise and allowed it to get away. And we get the scene where Kirk and Spock are talking on the other side of glass panels, protecting the engine room from the radiation. And they have that final moment of reiterating their friendship before we get Spock's body put into a torpedo and launched at the Genesis planet while Scotty plays Amazing Grace on bagpipes. I hate Amazing Grace as a song. I hate people who think themselves wretches. I hate the religious implications of it. It's not my kind of song. But the moment works. And of course, the capsule lands on the Genesis planet and we get the tag that leads us into Star Trek 3. I'd argue that this is probably the best of the Star Trek movies because it gets the characters right. It gives enough character beats for the main characters, leaving aside Chekhov and Sulu and Uhura, who get poorly served in this. And also in Space Seed, Uhura gets bitch slapped by one of the genetic Supermen, who's a white guy, which left a bad taste in my mouth. But the trio of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy particularly get their character beats, and the three-way friendship between them is iterated by the narrative. Having a decent villain as well, somebody who can stand up to William Shatner's overacting, the way Ricardo Montalban very much does, works. Khan's an interesting, complex character. He's as mad as a cut snake. He's a real threat to not only the Enterprise, but the Federation itself. And he is over the top. And there are some good beats as well where Khan is making decisions, whereas his H2IC Wacom, played by Judson Scott, is trying to tell him the right thing to do. We've got the Genesis device. We don't need to stop and kill Kirk in the Enterprise. We can go wherever we like and do whatever we like. But that Captain Ahab-like obsession that Khan has with Kirk being his white whale doesn't allow him to do the smart thing. The only thing he could think of is revenge and hatred and all that from hell's heart I stab at thee stuff, which is a direct quote from Moby Dick. He knows he's Captain Ahab and he knows he's got an obsession, but he can't let go of it. And his mind is broken by the adversity of the past 15 years of his life. And that's kind of interesting too. He is the Lucifer of the piece. He has descended to hell and come back again to try to get revenge. And that complexity is really the strongest narrative we have in one of the Star Trek movies. Kirk, of course, also finding out that David is his son and that he hates him because he's Starfleet and David is very much anti-militaristic. And after the death of Spock, David and Kirk reconciling and coming to terms with one another. That's a nice part of the art too. That's another part of the strengthening narrative where even though there's a cartoonish aspect to the Star Trek movies and particularly the Star Trek original cast movies, there's just enough realism there and just enough groundedness to satisfy an audience and satisfy the needs of an audience to identify with and understand the characters. Even though Kirk can be a pompous and self-important wanker a lot of the time, those character beats of weakness and those character beats of self-doubt work really well to strengthen our opinion of the character. So that's my thoughts on Star Trek II and Space Seed. I'm still left with Khan being such a problematic character in Space Seed, and such a manipulative character, and such an evil character, and such a top. That's kind of interesting. The sexual implications of Space Seed are really interesting, while they are somewhat disturbing as well. There are so many red flags with that character. And then seeing the broken Khan we have in Wrath of Khan makes it much more interesting. We see the comeuppance of the character, and the fact that everything he wanted has been taken from him, mostly due to himself, but also due to the fact that he was just dumped there by the Federation. Really interesting narrative between the two. And I would always suggest, if you go to watch Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, watch Space Seed first. It's going to make a much better experience for you, and a much more complex experience. And I think that's the perfect way to do it. So that's what I got for you this time around. Star Trek II and Space Seed. Had a great time watching them. Had a lot of things to think about when I had watched them. I'll probably watch them again in a few years and just enjoy them all over again. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member, by donating through YouTube, or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies, which now offers annual patronage. You can pay 12 months in advance and get a bit of a discount on the 12 months through Patreon. They've just established that, and I've activated it for the channel. Particularly subscribe. I'm trying to get to 15,000 subscribers before the 17th of this month. I probably won't make it, but if you can give it a bump and you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Next up, we've got the live stream on Monday, which is Sunday in most places around this clay and granite planet, where I'm going to be having a bit of fun. It's my birthday month live stream. I'm going to kick out the jams and just have a good time with it, and I'd like it if you were there as well. So until all of that stuff happens, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some movies with histrionic actors just overacting to the max, and I'll catch you next time.